Welcome to Breaking Ties, a new you after divorce. This is your go-to source for practical advice and support for when the divorce process has finished. Join us each weekday for a quick chat where we'll cover a variety of topics related to post-divorce. Together, we'll explore the emotional, financial, and legal aspects of life after divorce and help you find the best path forward for you and your family. Here's your host and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst professional, Mike Fulkerson.
Welcome to day 2 of the Breaking Ties interview series, where we talk with a professional who assists those going through the divorce process and answers many of the common questions you may have. As always, I'm your host, Mike Fulkerson, and with me today, again and back, is Marson Maynor. Welcome, Marson, to the show.
How's it going today?
I'm doing pretty good. So for our listeners, Marson is a loan officer with Geneva Financial and an expert in mortgages and the mortgage process. He's got a lot of experience to lean on. So we're going to try to get through that experience and share it with you today. You ready to go, Marson?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, buddy.
No problem. Glad you could join us. All right. So for our listeners, if you didn't catch yesterday's podcast, we went over 4 questions yesterday. You're going to want to catch that. They were good questions. It was great responses. So we're going to pick up with 4 different questions today, and we're going to get some more information. We're going to start with, can one spouse force the other to sell the house?
No spouse can say we have to do one thing or the other. But without both spouses coming to some form of an agreement, which one could be forced into choosing a certain way, they're going to be stuck. So they're going to have to figure out what's going to work best for them, either retaining the home or do they need to sell the home. No, those are really pretty much going to be the only 2 things, right? But as far as actually forcing, force is such a big word, I guess, because you can't force somebody to do their push-ups, but financially you could probably make it tighter for someone and that could hurt. So then that forces them to have to maybe lean towards one side of the decision that they maybe didn't want to do.
Right, exactly. The whole process it's a negotiation when you're working on finishing off the divorce process and the marriage settlement agreement. So we get through the process, and what are the options for refinancing the mortgage once the divorce is finalized?
Good question, man. There's basically a couple. So the majority of it would be if they're going to retain the home, obviously, because if it's post-divorce and they still have ownership of a property, the refinancing can be for a couple of different reasons. One spouse is going to retain; they just want to have the other spouse removed, so that way that spouse can go on and move on with their life, so to speak, buy a new home, whatever the case may be, a condo, it doesn't matter. But then there also might be another need for a refinance where you're cashing out some of that equity that may have been negotiated in the divorce negotiations, where depending on how long, what you paid for it, how long you've lived there, what you owe on it, there could be substantial equity that may need to be split up between the 2 parties. So the party that's going to be staying in the home would do what's called a cash out refinance, where they can access a portion of that equity. Let's just use an example of 50% ownership, right? So the one spouse is going to retain whatever mortgage it is, but let's say there's $100,000 in equity. They could refinance, get $50,000 out, as long as the parameters work correctly from a qualifying standpoint. But then give that $50,000 to the other spouse so that then they can go and do what they need to do. So it's 2-pronged, because you want to, if they have ownership in the property, they need to be removed from the ownership, quit claim deed, all that kind of stuff, change the mortgage, change the title. And then also from a compensation, if you will, standpoint, where they can get some of the earned equity into their own pocket. So, make sense?
It does. That was very well done. Now, one of the things that most people often think about when they're going through the divorce process is their credit. So, do you have any tips on how people can protect their credit during the divorce process and the mortgage side of things as well? Yeah, that's fantastic advice right there. So this actually concludes day 2 of our 5-day interview.
Wow.
Please join us tomorrow as we continue our discussion on mortgages and divorce. Marson and I would like to thank you for joining us today on the Breaking Ties interviews series. Should you have any questions for Marson, you can find his contact information in the description of the podcast. And remember, divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. We'll see you tomorrow.
We want to thank you for listening to this episode of Breaking Ties, a new you after divorce with Mike Fulkerson. For questions, please reach out to Mike via email in the description or give him a shout at 630-444-1410. Remember to subscribe, like, and follow.